real one. Yeah, we know they're gonna have like their actual like knowledge. I guess
customized to the project. I think this is teaching team or just like defining the outcome first team. Even if you say like some of these things I agree with, we should do it. Yeah, really. How do we use all this?
Give us 20 more seconds. One more time.
Teams that agree on the outcomes.
Respecting your time.
I already wrote yours down. I anticipated it. So we technically have some space here and maybe here and here. Do you have any others?
Okay, we're gonna stop in 10, 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 1. All right. Nice. Now we're gonna make something else. And what we're going to do is a little complicated. So I'm going to prep this up, but I know we can do it. So we're going to all stand up in a line in a minute, and I'll explain how this works. And we're going to all, the half of you are going to be on one side, and the other half are going to face the other people, like Katie is demonstrating.
Oh, yes, I will be the other half of this line.
Yes. Okay, so it's going to be a long line. It might have to snake a little bit. And that's okay. And so this is my thoughts. If you are on, this would be stage right, house left of a table, then you should face that wall. And if you are on house right, you should face me. Okay? And then find someone and get right opposite them and shake their hand.
And then we want to find somebody else to come on. If I understand What do I do?
Like
I'm Eric. I wish it did for you.
a moment, think about, and this was in the Ancienda also, similar kind of idea. This comes from a book by Christopher Anderson, a whole book of these. Think about which one doesn't belong. And go back to that same person. And I'm going to warn you, I'm going to clap again and make you move. So what's going to happen next is Dawn is going to move all the way around to this side. And everyone on this side of the line is going to scoot one person over. If you've ever done swing dancing, this is how it works. So that's how I met my husband. So that's a little preface, a little warning of what happens next, but take a moment now to explain which one doesn't belong. My faculty does this to me sometimes. It's very low energy coming, and maybe they're feeling low energy, and I explain that to have some empathy for me up here. Like a louder energy coming makes me feel good. So just if you feel like that the next time I clap, I would appreciate it. All right, so Dawn, you're gonna go right over to Katie over there, and everyone else on my side, shift one person, introduce yourself, and explain what you
We were like trying to figure out
can sit back down and
You can have it. I'll forgive you.
Which one doesn't belong? Try to watch. Okay.
Parallelogram is the only one with two horizontal sides.
Okay. Anyone else?
Except there's two parallel. There are, yes. The traditional parallelogram, there's two round sides.
I said this, there's only one answer. The only one right answer is the square because of the angles.
Which square?
The yellow shape of the four boys.
Okay, the yellow shape.
No.
Oh, big.
See what you did.
They all belong in their own way. We're being inclusive. No, feel bad.
Well, another answer is there's really no one right answer. Right? They're all correct. But what did you get from that activity though as you were discussing it with new people maybe that you just met? Different perspectives?
I'm not always right.
You're not always right.
how would you assess that? What the different answers? Was one better than the other? Was there some rubric of answer that would quantify this?
If you were a teacher doing this as maybe some activity in your subject or your class, no matter what the subject, what would you want your students to get out of it?
Well, I mean, in a situation like this where there's not necessarily a right answer, I hope to be able to support why they think that's it's not the answer, but they're at least
Process to get to that final answer. So at Synapse, we use this as a model for constructivism because we are a constructivist school. We'll get a little more into how we do our curriculum and our project a little further in. And one thing I should say is if this starts creating more questions for you, that sheet in the middle of your table is meant for you to continually ask questions and write them down, especially if it's not a point of where we're sharing questions at that time. So feel free to just keep jotting down questions as we go, and hopefully we'll get to talk and discuss about some of them.
So we wanted to just tell you a little bit about Synapse. And one thing about constructivism is we like to sort of start with something before you really know much about it. So that was sort of the purpose of some. Well, one thing is I love that little icebreaker. If anyone knows me, I keep it even though it's a little. But we also like to get people thinking, started, moving, and we'll talk a little bit more about that before we get into the learning, so to speak. Even though we consider that. But just to tell you about Synapse, our mission is to educate the change makers of tomorrow. We are a small, private, we call it independent school in Menlo Park, California. We are 9 years old, so pretty young. 240 kids, K through 8, and just lay this on the table. Not equitable. It's not equitable. It's expensive to go there, and not everyone can go there, and so that's not what we're. We don't pretend it's anything but that. So just, to be honest, it's also an absolute sort of playground of what we think education should be. It is based in what we believe makes a change maker, which is research-based, brain-based academics, social emotional learning, which we call emotional intelligence, and this idea of innovation. Many people say we're a progressive school. We like to use the word transformational. aggressive, has a lot of connotations, and so we are looking to transform learning, and we are constantly doing that. And we are a lab school as well, so we invite people to come in and see the school if you are in California. Our contact information will be at the end of this. We would love to have you visit. We have people visit all the time. And we're actually going to. So this is a little bit of a view of our school from standing up on the second floor. And you can see already it doesn't really look like a school. It's a big office building that's been converted. I mentioned the social emotional learning. That is at the core. We use something called 6 Seconds. This is an international emotional intelligence network that we derive 8 competencies, we call them, or social emotional learning. Also connected to neuroscience. We have partnerships with UCSF. Neuroscience is there, which is hiring a science teacher. We also will partner as a neuroscience with Stanford and UCSF. And we have some key tenets. Humor. We believe that people should laugh. So I'm going to tell you a joke. Are you ready? Okay. The past, present, and future walked into a bar. It was tense. You know who told me that joke? Siri. She doesn't tell it anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not a good one. But we do really believe in humor. We believe in choice. We believe in multiple modalities of learning. We differentiate and we are very focused on process or the product. We don't have grades, so we don't have tests. We spend all our time in project-based learning. We believe strongly in interpersonal. That's part of the social emotional learning. And we strongly believe that the adults are role models for the children, and it's not what we say, it's what we do that matters. We say all we want, but it's what we do that matters. And yet, we struggle with assessment. So we are here, and we chose this topic because we have been struggling with this. So we don't have answers. We don't presume to have answers. We're going to take you through a project and sort of talk through how we assess pieces of it. We're hoping to learn as much from you as we might be able to share. But for fun, we thought we would beam you into our school if the technology works. So we have these things called beams. Has anyone seen a beam? They're kind of made fun of on some commercials where they're basically like iPads that you can drive around. So this is our school. It's a Saturday morning at noon. And Stephanie's going to drive around.
Here's our front lobby, our front door. Oh, too bad we don't have ears. I'm going to do my best to try not to crash.
So you walk into our school, you can see I gave you that above ground view, and the very first room, and there is our capital block room, and this is a room entirely for building with, what capital blocks are. They're just little blocks. And kids, we don't go in there before school, after school, during recess, and they build things. And I also like to say, just as an exercise in social emotional learning and emotional intelligence, because things also fall down. Not sometimes on purpose, sometimes not on purpose. So there's a lot of navigating emotions, and there's consequential thinking, and there's being careful around other people's structures, being kind when you write the note on the structure that says don't knock this down, not don't you dare touch this. So that kind of gives you a sense of the idea that we're a school of builders, and that's kind of what we try. And the founder of this beam of our school is, hence we have beams. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah. Maybe no. All right.
So here's what we have decided to do at the school and what we're trying to do. When we started our school 9 years ago, we sat down to really think about what are the desired outcomes that we have for students. And we created this list, this giant rubric of outcomes that had 30, 40 things on it. And so over time, what we've done is distill it to what we consider 9 Synapse learning values. And so we are using these as our assessment tools. When you think of a report card instead of grades, we report on these. And so our focus is really on the journey, the process of learning. And we'll show you a little bit at the end what our reports look like. But the goal here is not to completely master something, because, for example, with risk, how can you in 4th grade completely master risk? And what does it look like to be done with risk? To just sit back and never take a risk again. And so what we're trying to think about is what's developmentally appropriate at each stage for these values. What does it look like for a 1st grader to take risks? And what does it look like for us to assess that? And for us to give them feedback on that? What does it look like for an 8th grader to take risks? And so these are what we've identified for our entire school. And we're working on breaking that down into developmental assessments. So that's one thing that we would really love to show you and get feedback on, but also to talk about. It's different. Okay.
So to give you some context of how we do project-based learning at Synapse, so perhaps to give you some context of how we're going to talk about our assessment and how we assess students, we use what we call the HEARTS model. This is a way we plan everything at our school. It can be planning a lesson, it can be planning a whole project. We'll use this model, this layout, and we also use it for all the subjects at our school, everything from ELA, social studies, and science, and math, to visual arts and music, and sometimes PE as well. So, and our teachers are trained in this, and they know how to plan their projects through. So, you started with some heat, part of the heat process, just when you got here, where we involved you in a review exercise. I'm going to put it in quotation marks because maybe you met some people, but it also involves physical movement and a morning meeting. This is really just to kind of stimulate the kids as they first get to school or when they get into the classroom for their lesson. And then next they step into that engage phase where it's as a teacher and think, oh, I should stop and pause. And you might be familiar with basically this general layout of how you introduce a lesson into your class. So we just put a label on it. So when we go through the engage section of this, we're sparking interest in the students. It can often be through play. It's really related to that broader context, just to get your students engaged and interested. And then next we go into activate. We're doing some hands-on experiential pieces where the students really get to go through some authentic experiences and start to get deeper into the content. When we go into the reflect part, they're starting to integrate their new learning. They're discussing theories and concepts tied to what they're learning and what the content is. And then during the transform, we're taking what they've known, what they've reflected on, all those concepts and that new learning, and starting to solve authentic problems that we posited for them. We give them a lot of choice at our school. It's one of the ways in which we differentiate. We should also say that we have mixed grade levels. Kindergarten's on its own, but we have 1st and 2nd grade together, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th, and 7th and 8th, where they're actually going to be together. So that's another thing to know at our school. So that's another tricky thing in terms of assessing for our students. And then they'll end the lesson or the project with some kind of store activity where they're content sharing out.
I would also say that this really scaffolds project-based learning. I've seen at many schools where project-based learning can really drift into doing a project and not bring in that engagement, not bring in the new. And so by having a curriculum planning process tied specifically to what we believe are research-based ways that kids learn, it allows, and to train our teachers in that way, it sort of stops, I think, that drift away. This is a project, well, in our mind, this is. And this can last
Oh, yes.
10 weeks, this can last a week, this can last a day.
Yeah, so there's flexibility in terms of timing, and sometimes you might have a whole unit that lasts a whole trimester that you go through each of these, stretching it out over weeks. But then within that project, maybe day to day, you'll have each of these steps as you introduce any content of the project. So there's lots of flexibility, even though it appears.
Okay, so, okay, we're gonna pause here. Based off of what you've heard so far, and what you've been thinking, go back to that paper where you started your question storming, your parking lot of questions. Don't try to answer anything. What questions would you add to your list? Come for a few minutes with your team, or do a post-it brainstorm, however your team wants to.
I added one or two.
Go back to that question storming for a minute.
Grab the beer chicken.
Alright. Is that sort of like, alright, I don't want to use this. I know. Keeping goals of theirs or mine, or like, I don't want to say the hard yeah, I had the same.
Trying to write here.
Alright. Now where's she at? I just read the chat. I would like to know more. I would like to get to know it. Yeah, I want to like. All right. You're done. You developed the SMS. That's all I write. Yeah. It's hard. Yeah, we found out it's a piece of your plan, so that's why I thank you.
This is expanded by school run and what's particular teaching skills or to make sure that's right.
So a big part of what we want to do is discuss and really talk about these questions. So I want to show you some of the places where we're struggling. So we have this model for curriculum planning and for project planning, and built into this model are some really organic opportunities for assessment. And so we wanted to walk you through a small piece of something that we did with students in 3rd and 4th grade. So we have a mixed level class. And they are looking at European expansion and explorers. And so their big question for the trimester is, how were the Americas transformed by colonization? And so they're really thinking about not just the explorer perspective, but the indigenous people that were impacted by European expansion. They're looking at, specifically in this lesson, how do explorers use measurements to guide their journeys? And then the lesson that we're going to do today is about the most optimal route for a trader in the new world. So this big unit is integrated cross-curricularly. The lesson that we're going to do, I'm going to put quotes around it, is a math lesson, but you're going to find that it's also social studies, it's ELA, and it's science as well. So it's not one specific subject, it is cross-curricular. So, are you ready? Okay, get excited, because this is one of my favorite lessons. I taught this lesson a few times with this age group, and it's turned out differently every time. So, the first thing we do in the engaged phase is we give you a direction without a lot of explanation. So, you are going to need, a pen, paper, or just the ability to skywrite or create something in your mind. Are you ready? Sure. In front of you, you have a landscape. That landscape is tape and other things, but I want you to imagine that it's something different. You don't know exactly what this landscape is for, what it's called. You don't know all those things, but here's your direction. Make a map of that landscape. Go. This.
If you would like some paper, you can come take some. What are they doing?
How I look at the about that.
On the example, yeah, but not on the set.
Baby map.
Yes. Gigantic grocery store in Paris.
It's a mega one. There aren't enough of the little
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. So let's just say, yeah, pound for you.
But now we might be able to do like that? Come on, there's no time. lake, we got a lake here.
Yeah. Everything about dotted lines is not filling in like.
What are the X's? That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. I'm using my loud voice, but hopefully it isn't loud enough. Come on back. Okay. So I'm sure you've noticed, or maybe even felt, that uncomfortable moment of, I don't know what to do. Somebody tell me what to do. You're asking questions to try and figure out exactly what it is that I want you to do. But the goal here is that it is vague on purpose and that it's open to interpretation. So I've done this a few different ways where the week before we had been doing a mapping activity. And so I use this as an engage to come back and check their understanding a week later. I've also used this as an opening to talking about maps. What is your understanding of a map? So some of you may have drawn directly on the landscape. Some of you may have done this independently. Some of you may have worked together. What were some of the questions that came up for you in this process of just make a map of your landscape?
What do the X's stand for?
What do the X's stand for? I'm not answering yet, but what are your questions?
Perspective. How am I supposed to be looking at this? Like I initially looked at it as if I were traveling towards this thing, except I saw it like as an island and I'm trying to think about what it looks like.
Interesting. Yeah, you're oriented. Any questions? Scale.
My initial thought was the map is an abstract representation of a place that's already abstract and done.
Ooh, we are in school.
That threw me off.
Okay.
So
just to point out, if you can see the pictures, the way we do this with kids is we actually put tape on the floor. And we use these little mini blue blocks. We have blue blocks that are large, and we put those out as well. And we just didn't think we would have time to make. We actually discussed this. We're like, if we do it on paper, they're going to see it. Yeah. You can put tape on the floor.
Yeah, well, the blue blocks could represent structures, they could be landforms. What does the tape represent is a whole other question to be thinking about. Is this a real place? And so here's an example of what a third and fourth grader did. Well, she wasn't in fourth grade, she was in third grade, but in the class level 3 is third and fourth grade. And what she was doing is really interpreting what she saw. And so we use this as an engage to really get their prior knowledge, their background information out on the table. So we're all starting with a common understanding. So the next point that I want to make is that every activity that we do in this project process has a debrief to come together and really reflect and talk about what it is that just happened, come to some common understanding, and move on. Liz and Stephanie mentioned that this process could take a really long time. This is a project and a process that we've done with kids that takes weeks, and we are going to do it in about 30 minutes. So brace yourselves. Here's your next. Here's your next task. I want you to be thinking, based off of what you just saw and what you just talked about, what could we assess in this activity? And that's for your group to talk about. What could we assess here?
Do the kids know that you need a key to be able to explain what things are on the map? Is that something you're trying to learn? And then you know, they get that little nugget of information that someone's are in the unit so that they can create maps later on that people can sharing
thinking about we did. I don't know checking that box.
If you can survive what is your body, if you show me the shape of a mountain. Okay. Hi. Something interesting I heard is, should we assess? So that's a really interesting thing that we can think about as well. But before we pull answers, we'd love to ask you one more question. How could you assess? So you've just talked about what you might be looking for. How would you assess those? How would you document that, record that? How would you capture it in some way? What tools would you use? What does that look like? So take a moment and think about how. So.
active monitoring while they're doing this.
Laptop or something.
Like to talk to me, he was saying things and I'm like, would be like, so if that was the skill I didn't develop it, he developed it. It's like my mind is like wrapped around. I just wrap it. Again, I agree, you know.
It's not whatever, but I'm cool with that answer.
Right, so back in about 10 Okay, let's go back together. And let's go back to the first question you posed, which was, what could you assess after that brief activity? If these were your students, in whatever grade that you are thinking about, or maybe some other levels, what could you assess? What would you want to assess? What did you talk about at your table? Yes?
I think a really important thing is first range wise. So I think we're talking about we're going to assess collaboration. We've got to like then what that sound like. Because I think sometimes we do a little bit we're assessing we assume we have experience that vision, both for students and teachers. So before we kind of can assess really we have to share that vision.
Okay, so making sure teacher and student are on the same page, so that if they're reaching for that goal, the teacher wants them to reach that goal. It's actually the same one and not two separate ones.
Yeah.
Okay. What else would be assessed? Yes.
You could have assessed what
Okay. So the actual just the product.
We thought about being a rubric to assess it. So we were going to assess collaboration, but we're creativity, having some sort of clear before the exercise. So having that.
Okay, and that would be that one, like a solution.
And doing, and we also go assess what else is something that's more, it seems more formative than 45.
Yeah, and then also you knowing our context of this is a much longer process. Yes.
Just assessment by analysis cartography. Scale, the orientation, Euclidean or non-Euclidean geometry. You understand that a map is an expression of a point of view and a point of mind.
So both those very hard content skills. Do they understand that? How well do they have?
your willingness to take risks. A project like that is so broad. Some students really pull back, express themselves and use their imagination or creativity so to assess them. How risky were they willing to be with this?
And maybe perhaps with such an open-ended prompt, you're just making math, and then very little pressure or limitation without that. Okay. And then how? How might we assess content skills, or what are some other ways of deciding rubrics? How would we assess different pieces of those values? Oh, okay, so that's just videotaping their activity.
I said anecdotal notes just as you're walking around listening to the students. I also said the students could do a self-assessment, even if it's as simple as frowny face, neutral face, happy face, how they felt they did, and maybe having the students do a running list of questions that they still had. You can Google that, but they did it as a collaborative.
In fact, yeah.
At this point in time, we have single drafts, so we're also sending an isolation map as opposed to this is draft 7. And through all these processes, they're fine-tuning what they want as well as what the audience understands. Also, all of these are in some way or form like tricky handprint drawings down the hallway. So while they're all unique, it assumes not only a point of view, but a particular use of medium. And so the moment a kid or a team of kid decides mapness means something radically different, Aboriginal song lines or like collage or whatever. Again, if we have a preset of values and rubrics, it's hard to know what to do with this. If we love kids despite rubrics, we fall in love and go more of that, please, and then we get into all kinds of full-time issues of what we actually need.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just also bound by time if we're thinking about that. Because as a teacher, I always love to say yes to students when they come up with a little loophole of, well, can I just build my map out of these materials instead? So it depends on what you want them to get out of it, right? Katie, can you share some things that you assess and how you assess what you're actually teaching with them?
Yeah. So a lot of the things that you've brought up, the self-assessments, the understanding of what a map is, this is where we stop and we talk and come up with a common definition of what the map was. So when we talk about creating a rubric and knowing what the objectives are ahead of time, this is when we create our objectives and our rubrics with our kids. So the goal here is that everybody has buy-in, everybody is part of the process of the decision making, and then we go back to our maps for iteration 2 and add things we want to add, take away where we want to take away, and revise. So the goal here is to offer something that's accessible to everyone. Everyone has some construct of what a map is or means to them. You're pulling everybody in. You've got a low floor, potentially a high ceiling that you could really take this in depth. And you've got an opportunity to talk about what your preconceived notions are of a map. So this is just the first part of this project. So I know that we haven't talked about what the big picture project is. This is just how we are getting started in our map making skills here. Yes.
What would you include on the rubric? Like, what would specifically the kids come up with, or you as a teacher with the kids? What types of things would you come up with on that rubric?
So some of the things we've ended up with are very content specific, like having a legend or having a compass rose to make sure that everyone knows which direction to look at the map. Some of the things we might include are names. We need to label our map. So you have students really thinking concretely about how to help other people understand their map. But you've also got this interesting perspective of what story is this map telling you? And so we think a lot about, what is it that we're trying to convey with this map? Does this map tell a story? How would you assess whether your map tells a story? And some more abstract concepts that fourth graders are really ready to talk about. So it can go in lots of different directions. So what you can see that we're doing is we've started together, but we're starting to branch out and everybody's getting interested and latching on to different ideas that they would like, different threads that they want to pull on. Okay, so we have a spot here for you to go back to your questions, but here's what I would love for you to do. Think of this question storming page as a parking lot, so anytime you have questions pop up, make sure you write them down. But we're going to keep moving for the sake of time to show you what else we would do. So the next part of our HEARTS model, our planning model, is activate. And this is, we've had our common understanding, we've gone back, we've thought about our self-assessments. Now what are we going to do with that? We want them to dig in a little bit deeper. And so we teach them a new concept here. And this concept is making a graph, which is separate than a map. And we teach them this idea that a graph is a network, and we start talking about where lines come together as vertices. And so you can see how this could be thought of as a math lesson, even though it may be a math lesson, even though maybe it started with the social studies humanities frame. And so we also ask them, when they've made a graph, to measure the distances. And so in this situation, some of your lines are straight, some of them are not. They have to problem solve how to measure. They decide what their units are. They decide whether they're going to be very precise and accurate or whether they are using friendly numbers and rounding. And they are working together as a group to do those things. So they're actually generating more questions as they go. The next phase here is, and you can imagine that the debrief of that last one would take a long time. So this next phase is reflect, where we take a step back and really zoom out. We've talked with everyone about how to assess what it is that we're doing. We've measured, we've graphed, we've mapped. Now we ask them to find the shortest route. So in this situation, what we do is we have them pretend that they are traders, and they choose a village to live in. The X's represent villages on this map. And their job is to figure out how to travel to all the other villages and back home in the most optimal way. You probably recognize this problem. It's a really fun problem that you can scale out for high schoolers and adults as the traveling salesman problem. But we're really trying to make this an accessible real-world project for these students. The other thing that you can do here is you can, and what I've done when we've studied colonies, is you can take little pictures of different colonies in colonial America and create maps of these villages and towns in colonial America. So they're discovering along the way. So what they've realized is they've actually mapped out the 13 colonies. They didn't know that they were doing it. And isn't that cool when you make that discovery here at the end? Okay. So Liz talked about how we frame our school as a transformational school, and a big part of our model is transform. Here's where we talk about the rules and the strategies for this problem, and where we see this happen in and around our lives. So it might be that we talk about Amazon trucks delivering packages. It might be that we talk about you have this situation where you need to go to get your lunch, and you need to go talk to the music teacher, and you need to go find your friend to talk to them. What's the most efficient route, optimal route through the school? And so transform is, we've dug into our content. This is where our students really decide which threads they're going to pull on. And this is where our projects start to really branch out and they take personal shape. So transform is where we are really pushing them to dig deeper and decide what they're interested in based off of the experience we've already given them. And so this is where the project diverges. So, yes, all right. Store is the end of our cycle where they share and we have an exit ticket to really end our process together. Oh, just throw this out here. We did this activity and this project with 60 kids in a big open space. And this lasted for several weeks, really trying to draw this out. This year we connected this activity to the Silk Road, and we were looking at optimal routes for trading. And so we did this in the abstract, and then we brought it to mapping routes with traders. So our goal here is to get them bought in, to have a real foundation for the skills we want them to have, and then branch out. So okay. Whew, that was a lot. Okay, so we're going to ask you those same questions again. And all of that depends on whether you are listening or not. So I apologize because I just talked a lot. But so what I want you to think about is this idea that we map, we graph, we reflect together. What would you see as the summative, the culminating assessment, if there is one, for a project like this? We talked a little bit about formative as you do it along the way, and you can do those things all along the way in this project. But what would you hope comes out of something like this? And think about the what and the how you would assess it. Talk with your table groups. Go.
Right, like there's a
on like, so what is the most efficient way for when the kids have much all of these things, what's the best thing, what's the most efficient wow, to do all these errands that you and still have a hectic right? I think just taking the things that you just hear, that is
consider those things themselves. Asking them, consider all those to give you the best based on
Wow, that's
They don't always necessarily be right. You have to use the historical
What are you going to look at? You guys discuss. Should you?
Well, we looked at, basically there, did they learn the math skills that they need? Very important. That's that quite easy.
Breaking out measurement and all that.
That's right, plotting.
We thought about, could they either, send kids errands of things you need to do, what's the most efficient way to do that, like going through, giving them an app, or giving them a set of scenarios of where someone's going, because it's the most efficient way to do it.
Okay, so posing the question in a different way than having
part of our discussion centered around is your assessment to figure out, or is your assessment to see if the kids know that, or if the kids can, figure out what the shortest route is, or are you asking them to consider all of these other things and come up with their own criteria for why they made their path? Like, Silk Road, we're talking safety and, just passability and all that, as opposed to just, Google Maps said this was the shortest route, so here's my answer.
Yeah. Well, just to jump in there for a second, that is such a good point. This is so abstract that we do it with the abstract first, and then we start integrating like obstacles and potential rewards for going in other directions. You see what happens. Such a good point.
Yeah, I mean, like, is the assessment the kids creating that list of concerns that they need to have, or is it just them considering them when they give you a response and saying why, justifying the path that they took. It could easily be one or both.
It's also really helping them with the context and then assessing them based on that. Because I know one of the ways we sometimes explain this is also in terms of that traveling traders, traveling salesman process. Like you're at school and you get your classroom to lunch, but you have to return a library book. You really want to say hi to Joanne at the front desk, and you want to check in on your friend who you know is in the Capitol Block Room building is checking in the tower. What do? Are you applying what you've learned in class to this actual this authentic problem?
And it's also differentiating. Like we have kids who will write computer programs to try to solve. This is an unsolved problem, actually. To get up to a certain number of cities, there isn't a solution necessarily. So you have some kids who are going to really go, as we say, that low floor, high ceiling. So you're also assessing, and we have third and fourth graders doing this, so different places developmentally. So you're also thinking across each individual kid, what would be their
Look at the behavioral and styles of kids in the project. Who you have your leaders, and in that, specifically on photography, who's running is your basically information leader, who's the captain running that journey, who's the efficiency expert, that who understands that the rest of the team might be able to help somewhere in abstraction, and that as we has assessments, things that are just poured out outside the classroom, but for tools inside the project to better understand what we do well.
Ultimately, the goal is to measure their social capabilities. One of the things that we do is whenever they learn things, the next set of lessons, assume that as a foundation, see whether they can do this. Taught them how to figure out this problem. You don't give them the same level of direction next time. You assume they know how to do that. A good way to test if you actually apply for the
What we would like to share with you is the way we do our summer assessments. It really accumulates into this giant day at the end of a trimester we call Portfolio Day. We welcome all the parents committed, maybe I saw some nods. Other schools do. You do something similar?
No, we were talking about portfolio.
Oh, okay. So what we do at our school, we're inviting the parents in, and the student on this day is the teacher. And they're taking their parents through what they've learned for that whole trimester in whatever projects they're doing, whatever subjects. And it can take different forms. Sometimes it's really them in front of their work and explaining to their parents how they worked with their classmates, what the final product was. But I should say that at Synapse, we emphasize process over product. So a lot of what they're doing on Portfolio Day is really explaining how they got to that point and not just, here is my map, this is the final thing. And then another part of Portfolio Day is also taking their parents through the experience. So part of it actually might be going with their parents and having the parents make a map and maybe the students assessing their parents and telling them, okay, well, when I did this, I measured it this way. And I asked Katie for a ruler. She didn't give me one, but I asked her. She said I could use it. Why didn't you ask for a ruler, Mom? But it's also part of that. It's an experiential day so that the parents at our independent school, they're pretty involved, very involved.
Gives an outlet for their involvement.
Yes. But it's for us, so it's also a way to really have the students practice those communication skills and proving what they know and showing what they know. Yeah.
Do you find that, given your first, second, and third, fourth setup, that the fourth graders are so much more adept at being able to walk their parents through the process of this experience versus the third graders who are maybe a bit more likely to just kind of, go step by step and not necessarily make those connections, or by the time the kids are in this third floor block, are they already at the point where they can make the connection to, hey, this is one gigantic experience, not a whole bunch of little things that we stuck on a big sheet of art paper and hung up?
It's a great question, and it depends on the kid, I gotta say.
It's a little bit of both. So we do portfolio day starting even in kindergarten. So a big part of this is that they know anytime they're doing anything in school that they are going to be accountable for explaining it later. And when you know that you're going to be accountable for teaching this and explaining it, suddenly you're starting to ask more questions to make sure you know what's going on. You're starting to take more notes so that you'll remember later. You'll maybe help with creating some sort of script and notes so that when you're up there with your parents, you know what to say. And so ideally, yes, we want their skills to get stronger and stronger. But there is also this thing that happens in middle school where they get to portfolio day, they've been doing this for years, and they're kind of like, I've been doing this for years. I don't need to practice this. Oh, got it. And then someone might ask, well, what about this? And they'll say, I'm not sure. And just get it. And so part of what we're also doing is coaching them to explain what it is that they know. How do you explain what you know? Is it enough just to know? Or is the communication piece really the most important piece? So portfolio day looks a little bit different for every student because every student approaches that.
And one of the things we're still working on is how do you hold, especially those middle schools, accountable for presenting that to their parents or whoever they have coming, because as a teacher, you can't just follow one student the entire time and take notes behind them. So that's one thing we also struggle with. Is yes, we use this as somewhat of assessment, but those conversations that are happening between student and whoever they're teaching,
we're not there all the time.
Yeah, we're not there all the time. And so they have all these portfolio days, but then in March we have this giant portfolio day we call Interactive Lab, where it's I should pause and say our school also operates on annual themes that are based on what we think change makers will approach and have to experience or have to use as a change maker. So there are things like risk and initiative was a theme, iteration was a theme one year, counterpoint. And so the Interactive Lab is around that theme, but also we have an annual change maker every single year. And the Interactive Lab is also centered around that change maker. And this is K through 8. And the whole second trimester and some of the first is devoted to preparing students for all these interactive exhibits and projects that they're not showing just to their parents. We open it up to others in our community. So it's not, this ups it a notch because they're not only communicating their knowledge and teaching to their parents and someone they're very comfortable with, but others, other students, just strangers sometimes, because maybe they don't even know who's coming by, but it's another dimension in that portfolio piece. And this is from a couple of years ago. This is our Ben Franklin Interactive one. And
we should also say, like, one thing about project-based learning is having an authentic audience for whatever it is you're creating. And so the portfolio days and the lab, for us, is one way that we can have that authentic audience and that students know they're going to be accountable. We also try to have, depending on the project, they may present to other people or do but that's part of the role of portfolio days.
Is portfolio day the assessment itself? And if it is, or if it's not, is there like another way for students or just portfolio day? And what is Interactive Lab?
So Interactive Lab is like a giant portfolio. Portfolio day is a mini way that you spend like an hour with parents telling them all the different things you've done. On Interactive Lab, everyone is like to create a museum of all the projects, and kids become the docents that explain what they've done, not just to their parents, but to whoever comes by. There's like a rotation that will come to your area, and you also move around to show them.
So portfolio day is the assessment.
So it's interesting that you say that. It is an assessment, right? In that it's really a way our parents assess what their kids know, probably more than it everything else because we're not shadowy ourselves one way. And in our community, our parents, other public schools are accountable to the city and to standards and to testing. In some ways, our parent community acts in that way for us, in that they are the ones that push on us the hardest. And so they're constantly, especially because we're doing things so differently, there are many questioning, is my kid really learning? How do I know my kid's really learning? And so we're getting that in that way. It's not obviously, work in many places, but that is one thing that is constantly sort of, and these parents are paying to go there, right? So you have also this economic driving side, especially from your head of school, there. So there are other forces that are pushing, and that also involves our vision process, in that parents really have to buy in, because otherwise they're not going to do that. So that's also something that we have to really.
So then, when they ask, "Is my kid learning?" How do you then? What do you share with them to show them that they are learning?
Nope.
Yeah. Jump in there to answer your question too. This is a summative event that we have, a portfolio is a summative event. But the other thing that happens is all of those things that we were asking about, what could you assess and how could you assess, those informative assessments that are happening all along the way. We have that data, but then we put those together and create kind of an end of unit check-in. It's not a test that results in grades on a report card, but each class does have a check-in so that you can see where those students are at the end of your unit. That just doesn't get publicly displayed. So that's something you would come to a conference with, talk about with parents.
This is what, just to show you what our report cards look like. So our report cards have all of the Synapse learning values, and then we have these runners who are running on a path towards independence. And so parents get in each subject area and then an overarching classroom or advisor perspective on how they are overall. And the runners are sort of placed along a continuum in each of these areas.
And not how creative they actually are, how do they communicate well. It's like Liz said, because it's on a spectrum of independence, it's how much teacher support do they need. So if they're over here, if the runner's at the starting line, that's a student who needs teacher support almost every single step of the way. And a student who's all the way over here is a student who is able to do it independently. Maybe also going farther and being a role model to their students in some of these areas.
I just wanted to, we have also something we call personal education plans. These are not personalized, but they are personal in that each student picks 3 goals, 3 SLEs that they want to work on. And so at the beginning of each trimester, students sit down and they think about, I want to work on risk, and they think about what is the goal around that, what would that look like, and where can I practice? And then they reflect back on that later, and then that also gets reflected in the reports. And we have just started having our faculty also create personal education plans and look through our SLPs. And so with me, I'm doing that as an administrator with my administrators, and each of these, my administrators are talking to the different group of teachers to say, what are your goals here? What learning values do you really want to work on this trimester or however?
And so this is, with these personal education plans, it's another way we're able to assess students on those Synapse learning values, because in these opportunities, we have the students are highly involved in creating this for themselves. So they're identifying where they think would be appropriate, or maybe where they can take more risks. It can actually be in actual subjects, but it can also be when I'm playing with my friends at recess. It's any realm within school, and sometimes for some cases we even pull it into things that are happening at home. And part of the process is not this is your plan, and that's it. But at the end of every trimester and even throughout, we're still working on this. It's something.
This is like iteration number 10 probably of this 100.
And the students are reflecting on it. even level 1 or kindergartners are reflecting on it and talking to the teachers one-on-one. Okay, how did I do this trimester? Am I going to keep this goal for the next trimester? Am I going to have a new one? Because I think I've done really well and I want to focus on something else. So, and then the teachers also go back and reflect on this, and part of this is recorded in our
we have only 5 minutes left. It's a long day. Thank you for sticking this out with us. So we want to go back to your questions. And we want to hear some of those questions that you put on your page and hear some answers as well that people may or may not have. So what were some of the questions? Take a moment actually. Why don't I give you just a moment to maybe put a star next to 1 or 2 that you think are sort of the most burning of those questions. And question storming is an interesting, I read about it recently, a way, rather than generating answers, having kids generate questions can really open them up to lots of different possibilities and routes they can go down. Hopefully that did that a little bit for you. Take a moment, maybe think about what would be some burning questions. We'll take some and then we'll all go back.
Still there. I think all messages.
Questions been shared. So it was easier to stand up and
You're asking about the Synapse. Yes. So my son just graduated last year, and he is now in an ultra-traditional public school, large, 500 kids in the class, and he's doing very, very well. The downside is that he gets very cynical, and because he's like, this is so stupid, there's better ways to do this. But he can play the game, and he's been very successful in terms of grades and tests. But I actually honestly had no idea. I wasn't sure how it was. It's totally surprised me. I'm taking a risk.
But is there some evidence?
Yes. So we don't have a ton of graduates. We have probably a total of 35 graduates, and we do check in on them. They're all in high school. I think we have one student that's in college at University of Chicago. But we do check in, and they all say they feel they were prepared. I mean, they've learned to ask questions, they've learned to advocate, and things like that. And they're placing into, I mean, my son, he's placed in, this is the kind of math they're doing, and he's in geometry, and as a ninth grader, and it's too easy.
And ninth graders are going to and applying to that wider education, so independent schools, public school teachers, boarding schools.
So there is a race. We have not heard, oh no, it's terrible. You know, there's some things they have to get used to the homework. We don't have much homework at all. But we're also, what we like to say is we haven't beaten them to death with homework for middle school. By the time they get to high school, they're kind of excited to have homework. And as a parent, I'm not exhausted trying to get them to do homework. Like, this is a new stage. Other questions? Not necessarily for us, but how do you
Or training your engineers? Our traditional like education stuff.
So there's two things. We have an associate teacher program where we train teachers in our in-house. If there's also a huge teacher shortage, and so I don't know where maybe other places as well, but in Silicon Valley, you can barely afford till they're there. So teaching is not the most well-paying profession, and so trying to get teachers is not easy. We're hiring a math teacher also. But we have almost 2 weeks of in-service before school starts and a week and a half of in-service at the end of the year. We have professional days during the year. We brought in the Buck Institute to work with us. So we have, and then we have these curriculum directors who go in and help do the planning and hold teachers accountable.
Yeah, so throughout the year, we're consulting with teachers, we're helping them design this curriculum, and we're able to give them that support. And a lot of that is support throughout the year is ongoing. It's really often day to day.
This is more of a question specific to your school. So how do you approach all of those kind of rote memorization things that like the public school would do, like their timetables and their like lexile scores move along?
So we do have an explicit reading program in the lower grades. We're using those foundations, and we have this parts time, and we also have skills time. So we do build that in. We don't have kids memorize times tables because we really believe in a more constructivist understanding of math that allows them to be able to figure out those things without memorizing. That's not something that we focus on. But we do also, Fontes and Pinnell, we do reading assessments. So we also do ERBs, which is an independent school test, although we are fighting that a lot, but that's something we have to do, and that's also a struggle. We're talking about that, we get rid of that as well.
A lot of assessments, just to jump in, a lot of the things that we do started not because the teachers needed to know where their kids were, but because the parents. What we're trying to do in our school is so different than what they know, or the way that even, I was educated as a student, that they needed some sort of metric and checkbox to feel comfortable. So using Fontes and Pinnell, there's that huge focus on the levels, make sure you're going up in levels. That's not our focus, but it's more of a check-in to make sure that we are meeting our curriculum and our verifying. But it's interesting who it's for.
This is one takeaway for you. I know we're just a few minutes over time, so I'm kind of late. But thinking about one thing you might be able to take back, and one thing that one person wondered about. And that. Thank you.
Yeah.